afternoon, I'd like to call the meeting of the Community Development Committee together to order. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move.
We have
Second.
Muse moves, Lee seconds. I think it was Lee. Okay, good. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Approval of minutes. We have the minutes of the October 21st, 2019 regular committee meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Lindstrom, seconded by Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Just as a heads up, Councilmember Chair Lilligren is at a business meeting in New Orleans, so I will be chairing until about 4:40, 4:45, and then I need to head to Lionel Lakes for a city council meeting there, and Molly Cummings will step in as to take my place as chair of the committee. So we'll have a little bit of a do-si-do here with the chair. But with that, we'll proceed with the business, and the first item is 2019-308. JT City of Oak Park Heights 2040 Comprehensive Plan and Comprehensive Sewer Plan presented by Corinne Wendell. Welcome, Ms. Wendell.
Hello, good afternoon,
Good
Madam
afternoon.
Chair and committee members. My name is Corinne Wendell, Sector Rep for Districts 11 and 12 in LPA in Community Development. And before you today is a review of the City of Oak Park Heights 2040 Comprehensive Plan. The map shown here is the location of the regional components within the city. Washington County is the park implementing agency for the regional parks component of the city, and it accurately describes all of the regional park system components. Regional trails located in the city include the Middle St. Croix Valley Regional Trail Search Corridor, and then there are no state or federal recreation lands within the city. And then also you could see on the map there that Highway 36 runs along the northern city limit boundary of the community. In terms of their community designation, Oak Park Heights is located in east central Washington County. It's surrounded by the communities of Stillwater, Bayport, Baytown Township, Lake Elmo, and Stillwater Township. And Thrive MSP 2040 designates the community as suburban. In terms of their forecasted growth, Table 1, also in your staff report, shows that between 2020 and 2040, the council forecasts that the city will grow by 820 people, representing 400 households, and that will be an increase of 900 jobs in the city within the same time frame. In terms of their planned residential density, Table 2 in the staff report, as shown here, illustrates the planned residential density in the city. The overall density for guided residential land is expected to be between 5.95 and 16.05 units per acre. Communities with a suburban designation under Thrive are expected to plan for forecasted population and household growth at an overall densities of at least 5 units per acre for new development and redevelopment, and so our Oak Park Heights is consistent with this policy. Their existing land use map shown here, and also figure 3 in your staff report, shows that the majority of land uses within the community are residential at 19%. Following that, a mix of commercial and industrial land uses equates to about 21%. And then also they have a few vacant parcels remaining, as well as their water and park facilities. So then looking to the 2040 planned land use map, also figure 4 in your staff report, shows that the city is planning to accommodate growth across the community in areas identified in the development areas. So development areas are guided for low density. They're scattered throughout the city. There's also residential business transitional areas. They're located generally along Highway 36, that corridor, and then also crossing with Osgood Avenue, and they allow for high-density residential within the community. The city plans to support forecasted employment growth throughout the development of existing vacant sites within the commercial and highway business land use categories. And so with that, the proposed findings are that the plan conforms to the Metropolitan System plans, is consistent with the council policies with proposed forecast revision, and is also compatible with the plans of adjacent local governmental units in affected jurisdictions. In terms of their meeting schedule, they will be seen by the Environment Committee on Tuesday, November 12th, and then by the full council on December 11th. And with that, the proposed action is to authorize the City of Oak Park Heights to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect, to revise the city's forecast downward as shown in Table 1 of the review record, and then to advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for transit. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the Oak Park Heights comp plan?
So moved.
Second.
Lindstrom moves, Johnson seconds. I'm assuming there's no discussion on the motion. So all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is 20193-309JT, City of Brooklyn Center 2040 Comprehensive Plan and Comprehensive Sewer Plan, presented by Eric Wycheck. Welcome, Mr. Wycheck.
Thank you, Chair Vento. I want to thank you for your reference to square dancing earlier in the do-si-do. I just started square dancing. I'm not very good, but I'm trying to learn. So before you today is the Brooklyn Center Comprehensive Plan. And I know that the City of Brooklyn Center's Community Development Director, Meg Beekman, was going to attend the meeting. It looks as if she's not here, but I'll keep looking for her. She might come in a little bit later. She had said she was going to plan to attend, so. 5 MSP 2040 has designated the City of Brooklyn Center as urban. Brooklyn Center is located in east central Hennepin County. It is surrounded by the communities of Brooklyn Park, Fridley, Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, and Crystal. This map shows the location of the regional system components within the City of Brooklyn Center. Three Rivers Park District is the park implementing agency for the regional park system components. Regional parks, park reserves, and special recreation features located within the city include the North Mississippi Regional Park. Regional trails located within the city include Shingle Creek and Twin Lakes Regional Trails and the West Mississippi River Regional Trail Search Corridor. The plan identifies roadway and corridor studies that include recommendations regarding alignments, changes in access and/or changes in land use. They include Brooklyn Boulevard improvements and Trunk Highway 252 improvements. The plan incorporates existing and future transit ways that are part of the current revenue scenario in the TPP, and we'll touch on that in the land use section. All wastewater generated within the city is conveyed through council interceptors, of which there are 5 within the community, and all the wastewater flow is treated at the council's Metropolitan wastewater treatment plant in St. Paul. In terms of forecasted growth, which is within Table 1 of your staff report, shows that between 2020 and 2040, the council forecasts the city will grow by 4,000 residents, representing 2,000 households. There will be an increase in 1,600 jobs in the city during that same time frame. Focusing on Table 2 from the staff report shown here, this illustrates the planned residential density in the urban areas of the city. The overall density for guided residential land is expected to be 22.91 minimum and 86.04 units per acre. Communities with an urban designation under Thrive are expected to plan for forecasted population and household growth at overall average densities of at least 10 units per acre. Brooklyn Center's plan is consistent with this policy. The city's existing land use map can be found in Figure 3 of the staff report. Brooklyn Center is predominantly residential at 53.6% residential. It has most of its commercial and office at 9.1% and industrial areas at 5.3% near transportation corridors. Approximately 11.4% of the city is parks and open space. The city's future land use map refers to Figure 4 in the staff report. That's also found in Map 3.3 in the 2040 plan. It identifies redevelopment areas within the city primarily focused on the Brookdale Mall redevelopment area, identified as a TOD opportunity site, and redevelopment opportunities for commercial mixed use along Minnesota State Highway 100 and neighborhood mixed use along Brooklyn Boulevard. These redevelopment opportunities emphasize connectivity, transit access, and a mix of uses to create a more vibrant and active street. The plan recognizes the existing and planned transit ways that are part of the current revenue scenario of the TPP. This includes the existing transit way, Sea Line Bus Rapid Transit, which opened last summer. And the plan also recognizes plans for the D-Line Bus Rapid Transit scheduled for construction in 2020 to 2021. The plan conforms to minimum densities established in the TPP for station areas along arterial BRT. The TPP directs urban communities with existing arterial bus rapid transit to plan for new development and redevelopment at an average minimum of 15 residential units per acre. Planned densities for areas identified for redevelopment in station areas in Brooklyn Center are 28.9 units per acre according to the plan. Council staff finds that the plan conforms to Metropolitan system plans, is consistent with council policies, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent local governmental units and affected jurisdictions. On Tuesday, November 11th, the Environmental Services staff will present to the Environment Committee. This item will be on the Metropolitan Council agenda at the December 11th meeting. And I don't think Meg is here, but I'd have a second look. No, she's not here. But I'd like to thank her for all of her hard work on this plan in any case. Council staff would like to propose the following actions: authorize the City of Brooklyn Center to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect, and advise the city to adopt the Mississippi River Critical Corridor Area Plan within 60 days after receiving final DNR approval, and submit a copy of that final adopted plan to the council. Any questions?
Any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Lee moves.
Second.
Lindstrom seconds. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Wycheck. And next we have Jake Riley presenting 2019-311 Denmark Township 2040 Comprehensive Plan.
Thank you, Chair Vento, council members, committee members. I'm Jake Riley, sector representative for District 3, but I'm representing District 12 today on behalf of Corinne in the local planning assistance unit. And before you is the City of Denmark Township's 2040 comprehensive plan. This map shows the location of regional systems within Denmark Township. And of note are the two regional trail search corridors running across the township in the northern third and diagonally across along the Mississippi River and State Highway 10, which traverses the lower border of the township near the city of Hastings. Denmark Township's community designation in Thrive MSP 2040 is diversified rural. Those communities are described as places with a variety of farm and non-farm land uses, including very large lot residential uses, clustered housing, hobby farms, and agricultural uses. And diversified rural communities are expected to plan for growth not to exceed forecasts and in patterns that do not exceed 4 units per 40 acres. Denmark Township is located in the southeastern corner of Washington County and is surrounded by the communities of Afton, Ravenna Township, Hastings, Niger Township, Cottage Grove, and Woodbury, which is probably should have come before the rest of the information. It's one of those days. Forecasted growth for Denmark Township, shown in Table 1 and also in your staff report, shows that between 2020 and 2040, the council forecasts that the township will grow by 490 people, representing 280 households, and there will be an increase of 10 jobs in the township in the same time frame. The existing land use, the township's plan shows the planned land use for 2030 as the existing land use. It is not expected to change from sort of today's. And that's it, figure 3 in your staff report. It carries forward those land uses from 2030 into the 2040 plan. They intend to maintain the existing land uses, given that the forecast doesn't show much growth within the 2040 planning horizon. Properties in the township are guided with 4 residential land use categories ranging from 1 unit per 40 acres to as dense as 1 unit per 2.5 acres. The township also has agricultural preserve areas representing more than 2,000 acres, and the plan calls for densities of 1 unit per 40 acres in those areas, consistent with council policy. So as you can see, the future land use plan is not much different. The township's acreages are primarily conserved from development. That's 75% of the area is enrolled in either the agricultural preserve program, which is appropriately recognized in the plan, but also through other conservation opportunities with the DNR. And Denmark Township is also in the Mississippi River Corridor critical area, and they have adopted a MERCA plan that has been reviewed by DNR staff, and a conditional approval letter was received from the DNR dated September 19th, 2019. So the proposed findings today are that the plan conforms to the Metropolitan system plans, is consistent with council policies, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent local government units and affected jurisdictions. The meeting schedule is that the full council will hear this item on Wednesday, November 13th, and you should note that the plan doesn't have to go before the Environment Committee because the township is not connected to the regional wastewater system. And the proposed action for you today is to authorize Denmark Township to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect, advise the township to implement the advisory comments in the review record for surface water management and forecast, and within 60 days after receiving the final DNR approval letter, the township must adopt their MERCA plan and submit a copy of that plan to us within 10 days after adoption. No one from the township or their consulting planners were available to join us today, but they did send their regrets, and I appreciated working with them on this plan, as did my colleagues. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Cummings moves, Johnson seconds. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And finally, last but not least, Michael Larson presenting the 2019-315 City of St. Louis Park 2019 Land Use Amendment Comprehensive Plan Amendment.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Community Development Committee. The City of St. Louis Park has submitted the 2019 Land Use Amendment Comprehensive Plan Amendment for council review. This is the first non-administrative amendment to 2040 comprehensive plans to come before the council. So I'm happy to give you a little more detail and answer your questions you have about this particular process, since I believe many, if not all of you, have not seen an amendment to a plan. So I do want to acknowledge that in the audience today we have Sean Walther, the Planning and Zoning Supervisor from the City of St. Louis Park, who is available to answer any questions if you have any. As a reminder, the council acted on the full update on the city's 2040 plan on July 10th of this year. So I'd like to do a little bit of an overview of amendments. Many comprehensive plan amendments are minor in scale and impact and can be reviewed administratively by staff. There are 13 criteria that we look at to whether or not an amendment qualifies for an administrative review. I've listed what I see are kind of the 5 most common and meaningful criteria that would result in this and future amendments that would come before you for approval. And the vast majority of them come before you because of the scale of the amendment. I could share with you the other criteria, but these are also, and I have them before me, but you can also refer to the local planning handbook that provides detail about that process. So very briefly, this amendment is coming to you because it does not meet administrative review requirements because of its scale. It is associated with potential development that would result in more than 100 housing units. and an increase in population forecast of more than 5%. And you see those two criteria that are emphasizing here under council review amendments. These are kind of the more significant situations where an amendment would be reviewed by the council. In particularly, you would see amendments that have potential conformance issue or are inconsistent with regional policy. Again, in most cases, it's really about the scale of the amendment associated, in many cases in the developed areas, associated with a potential project. So just a little more in detail, in this particular case, this amendment is associated with an amendment to the city's forecasts. And the forecast for 2040 is 520 additional households and a population increase that's slightly more than 5%. And I'll get into some of that detail later. Is shown in Figure 1 of the staff report. Thrive MSP 2040 gives the City of St. Louis Park a community designation of urban center, which you may recall from July. The area affected by the amendment is shown in red, which is located adjacent to the future Metro Green Line station at Louisiana Avenue, as well as it's located near the intersection of Louisiana Avenue and the Trunk Highway 7 service road. So it's good access to this particular site. It's shown in Figure 2 of your staff report. This map shows the regional systems in relation to the amendment locations. In addition to the future Green Line station, the site is located adjacent to the Cedar Lake Trail to the south, as well as the Metropolitan Council Interceptor to the north. The amendment changes the guiding land use for approximately 13 acres from commercial to transit-oriented development. The site is the location of a now closed Sam's Club and has been the subject of a recent planning study. Among the recommendations of the study was to change the guiding land use to allow for greater intensity and mix of uses, including residential and commercial. And this was in the works at the time of the completion of the 2040 comprehensive plan, but the city was not ready to act on this particular set of recommendations. So you may recall the density tables that you've seen in comprehensive plan updates. We update these with amendments, and as shown in your table 1 of the staff report, as a result of this amendment, the city's overall minimum planned density increases slightly from 34.43 units an acre to what you see on the table of 36.30. So this does increase the inventory of land that the city anticipates for infill and redevelopment and the potential housing unit capacity that is resulting in the amendment. Again, the city initiated a proposed forecast increase with this amendment, and this is shown in table 2 of your staff report. And council staff agree that the change in guiding land use to accommodate potential redevelopment is an increase of the capacity of the site for housing and employment and the associated market demand. Forecasted households for 2040 is now 26,230. That's an increase of 530 households. 420 of those are expected to occur before 2030. Concurrently, council and city staff have discussed an adjustment to the population forecasts as a result of larger than anticipated household sizes, which obviously affects as a driver of the population forecast. So as shown in table 3 of your staff report, because the anticipated household growth from the year 2021 to 2030 increases, and it increases from 1,200 households to 1,620, the city's allocation of affordable housing need also increases because it's based on that increment of growth over that coming decade. So that number increases from a total of 439 to 593. And then there's a formulaic breakdown of the bands of affordability that increase as well. So the proposed re-guiding conforms to the density policy of the transportation policy plan and creates new opportunities to focus housing and jobs near the future Louisiana Avenue station. Staff in general find that the proposed amendment conforms to regional system plans, is consistent with council policies with the proposed changes, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. Therefore, the proposed action for you today is that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached review record and allow the City of St. Louis Park to place the 2019 Land Use Amendment, Comprehensive Plan Amendment into effect to revise the city's forecast upward, as shown in Table 2 of the attached review record, and also concurrently to revise the city's allocation of affordable housing need for the 2021 to 2030 time period, as shown in Table 3, and advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for housing. That concludes my presentation, and happy to answer any questions about this or comprehensive plan amendments more generally. And Director Barajas, who probably can assist with that as well.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Lee moves, Johnson seconds. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? With that, thank you. And thank you to Sean Walther. We appreciate your work and the work of the leaders and your colleagues in the city of St. Louis Park. Kudos. And I also want to introduce Meg Beekman. She is the Community Development Director for the City of Brooklyn Center. Sorry, we moved really fast tonight, Meg, so we got through it, but great work. It was also, I also want to extend kudos to you and your colleagues and to the city leaders in Brooklyn Center. Brooklyn Center. I'm always getting Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park mixed up. Am I? Gosh, I kind of figured. Well, once I figure out how to do-si-do, then I'll be good with the park and the center. I'll get that all straightened out. So, thank you. And with that, we'll move on to the information items. As we do that, I'll call Raya Smiley forward, and I'm also going to switch places with Councilmember Cummings, who's going to sit in for me while I get ready to depart shortly. I don't want to have a commotion going in the midst of the presentation on the 2018 Plat Monitoring Report.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here. We're looking
Committee
forward to your
members.
presentation.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Raya Smiley. I'm a senior planner in Local Planning Assistance Unit and Community Development Division, and I'm here to present the 2018 program report of the Plat Monitoring Program to you. Okay. So I would like to first start with a kind of a big picture of how our data and policy relate to one another. In the heart of the long-range planning efforts are comprehensive plans that are that basically set the stage for guiding and planning for future land uses, and you're very familiar with them right now as we're in the midst of updating them, or authorizing the updates, I should say. And these future land uses, these guidings are to accommodate population growth. And then the comprehensive plans go through that decennial update that happens every 10 years. That's for the big picture overhaul. And then there are also amendments for interim changes, which, as you just saw in the previous action. Then the plans kind of provide a basis for the comprehensive plans, provide a basis for land use inventory with the existing land uses. We also receive information on building permits annually from all of the communities in the region that kind of shows the new developments that are being constructed in the region. So these are basically developments that have received the permit already to move forward with the construction. These data sets are complemented by the Agricultural Preserves program that I'll be presenting next after this. And the Agricultural Preserves program kind of identifies areas that are protected from development. And then there's the Plat Monitoring program. The Plat Monitoring program tries to capture land that will develop in the near future. So this is the stage before the building permits, and that is why we generally refer to the Plat Monitoring program as a credit program. So these are basically the intentions of the city to move forward with certain developments and but they have not received any permit yet. So the Plat Monitoring program started in 2001 with Plat data from 12 volunteer communities who reported their platting activity from the previous year in 2000. The program was established with input from the Association of Metropolitan Municipalities, which is now known as Metro Cities, and also the Builders Association of the Twin Cities, or for short, BATSI. The purpose of the program is to monitor residential development, including the number of units and acres platted, the mix of single-family and multifamily units, the land consumption, and also the average residential densities. The program gives the council an ability to assess the available land supply in the participating communities within the program, and we kind of monitor the density of new development for comparison with council's density policy, which is a average minimum of 3 units an acre for like this is a net density, so 3 units per acre per developable acre in these mostly developing edge communities. So these are just these are not fully developed communities, I should say. The participating communities are asked annually to submit information about their approved residential plats that are also sewered. So these are basically land subdivisions from the previous year. They also provide a copy of the plat that we go through and check the information. Based on this information, the net acreage of development is calculated through taking out the undevelopable land. So the what we consider undevelopable land for net developable acres is basically natural water bodies and wetlands, public parks and open space, arterial right-of-way, so this is principal arterials and A minor arterials, and also any land that is set aside for future development. So a lot of these plats have areas known as outlots that they set aside for a future phase of that subdivision, for example. And then this data leads to measuring the net density of residential development. The results of this program are not only used for monitoring purposes, but then the communities also receive a credit for higher density plats. So that credit kind of gives them flexibility in responding to the market when they're platting lower density developments, which happens quite often. So it gives them that ability to a bit of a wiggle room. So that's where the credit that I was referring to comes into play. The Plat Monitoring program is a crucial implementation tool in reviewing comprehensive plan updates, comprehensive plan amendments, as well as sewer extension permits. So if we receive, for example, a sewer extension permit request for a development that is lower than 3 units an acre, then the Plat Monitoring data comes into play in making sure that the overall density of that community is above the expectation of the council policy. So that's how the credit helps participating communities with permit application approval or comprehensive plan authorization. In some of the previous comprehensive plans that you have seen in the past few months, you may have noticed that in some of the density calculation tables, there's a line for Plat Monitoring program, and that's how that the number basically is plays a role in giving the communities credit for their efforts in higher density platting activities. So because of this credit nature of the program, the communities are encouraged to report as far back as 2000, which is when the data of this program started, even if the communities have joined the program later. So this map before you shows the participating communities in the region, and as you see, they kind of form a ring in around the mostly like very developed areas in the middle. Currently, there are 45 communities who participate in the program, including the first 12 volunteer programs. volunteer program communities, and those were the cities of Blaine, Chanhassen, Eden Prairie, Hugo, Invergrove Heights, Lakeville, Maple Grove, Ramsey, Savage, Shakopee, Waconia, and Woodbury. So the participating communities designation in Thrive MSP 2040 are mainly suburban edge, emerging suburban edge, and rural center. So kind of now moving on to the actual numbers from the 2018 report. This is also in the figure 4 from the report that shows a mix of single family and multifamily units through the life of the program. Overall, there are about an equal number of single and multifamily units platted, and I'm talking from 2000 to 2018. And that's about 54% single family residential and 46% multifamily residential. Communities platted 5,964 units in year 2018, and that happened through 131 plats. So that's about the average for the program. But 2003, as you can see also in this chart, that was the highest number of units platted. That was over 10,000 units. The program has not seen that jump since, and then the number from since 2003, the number gradually dropped to its lowest in 2009, when there were only 286 units platted. And that's basically consistent with the development proposals and development activity with the market crash. This is the figure 7 from the staff report that kind of shows the actual units platted, and that's the green kind of bigger bars. And also the vertical lines show the allowable range of units. So that's based on land use. Whatever the land use of that development is, based on the minimum and maximum. So, and if all the 131 plats that were recorded were subdivided at the lowest or the highest density allowed, that basically that line kind of shows where it would have fallen. And as you can see on the chart, communities have been mostly platting around the midpoint, and that's the dot that's kind of like right in the middle of all those lines. It's sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher, but it's pretty much around that midpoint, and it basically suggests that there's so the in some of the years, as you can see, is just below the midpoint. So that basically suggests that there's demand for lower density in the market for these communities that are participating in the Plat Monitoring program. So, and that's something that I want to mention, that, again, all these trends that we're analyzing are just for these 45 communities that are part of the Plat Monitoring program. So throughout the years, communities have recorded a variety of densities for development, or in some cases, or many cases, no plats. So some communities in some years report no plats, and some have reported no plats in multiple years, one after another. But here in this, which is figure 8 from your staff report as well, what I want to emphasize is the green line that shows, can you see the green line? That's the top one. That basically shows the overall net density in these platting communities since the year 2000. Except for 2009, which that overall net density dipped below 3 units an acre, which is council policy. The rest of the for the rest of the duration of the program, it's always been either at or above 3 units an acre. So, and that's for all the communities, all the plats since 2000. And that the other thing is that the Plat Monitoring program information is only part of what goes into the comprehensive plan updates, amendments, and sewer permits reviews. But it's something that helps. In 2018, the overall net density of developments for participating communities was 3.1 units per acre. And as also mentioned in the report, this overall decrease compared to 2017, which was just below 5 units an acre, in both number of units platted and the overall density is likely partially due to these communities not reporting their platting activity in 2018 because of most of them focusing on their 2040 comprehensive planning process. And as I mentioned before, communities can always go back and report previous platting activity. And this is something that, for example, next year they will be able to fill in the gap for 2018. So, yeah, basically, we're hoping that we will receive more of that information so we can have more concrete information for trend analysis.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
just a
Councilmember
brief
Johnson.
question on that point. So is this consistent 10 years ago? Did we notice the same kind of thing where reporting dropped during comp planning and then maybe it was filled back in retrospectively? Is this something that we're familiar with? Is that why we make that assumption?
Madam Chair, if I may, I'll answer because I did this program 10 years ago and Raya wasn't here. The in the last comprehensive planning cycle, we still only had 15 or 18 communities that were participating, and as part of the comprehensive planning cycle, the council, in taking action on each of those comp plans required the additional communities to participate in the program. So we did have some falling off at that time, but not much because we didn't have as many communities. In addition, we also were seeing that market crash at the same time. So it was easy for communities to report to us no plats because they didn't have any plats in that year. So we had a high return rate on the participating communities in that year, but didn't have as many communities.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Lee.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Is the way they report those planning, if a city changes its mind and how does that affect the credit bank for each city? If they change their mind from year to year about what they want in plat?
If I may, Madam Chair, Council Member, that's part of the nature of this program, with it being a credit program for platting activity. Um, if they do not end up going through with the development, we do not necessarily take that out of the calculation. If they end up, for example, replatting the same plat because the first one fell through and now a new developer is taking over and platting it differently, we record those as well. So that's another reason that we ask for copies of the plats. So we basically compare the two and but give the community basically the credit with the higher credit. So if, for example, the first plat had a higher density, but then in the second plat they end up lowering it, we keep the information from the previous plat, but then we do not double count the plats. This is to show that to give credit for the intention of this higher density development to the city, but then also at the same time acknowledging that the market does not go in a certain direction that the city may want it to go. So we do not take anything out of the program unless it gets replatted, in which case we recalculate it depending on that.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and Madam Chair, one more. Thanks for the clarification. My follow-up question is there a political advantage for the cities to not report one year and then report the next?
Madam Chair, Council Member, I don't believe so. I don't believe that there is any. This is a credit program, and we encourage the cities to report because at the end of the day, it's in their own best interest to do that. And in all of our information, it shows that the Plat Monitoring program has always helped the communities. If it at any point hinders, like the platting activity information, for example, the density is lower than 3, which is, again, as I mentioned, Plat Monitoring or platting activity is only one piece of the bigger puzzle. So then we do not, we don't, we don't let that hinder the rest of the process. For example, the comprehensive plan update review or the comprehensive plan review. So I don't know of any situations that it would or wouldn't affect the city reporting because of a political
Oh,
situation.
thanks.
Any other questions at this point? No. Please continue.
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, the council calculates the net density by taking out what's considered undevelopable. Again, those are, and as you can see, they're on this chart as well. So those are wetlands and water bodies, public parks and open space, arterial right-of-way, and anything that is, any land that is set aside for future development. And that is shown as other in this chart.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Just one
Councilmember Johnson.
quick question too. So, and we're working off of the existing comp plan. So, for example, if they've got um, uh, guided for commercial industrial, we're not counting that then. That would go in the other use because it's strictly residential. Okay.
Yes,
This is-
Madam Chair, Council Member, that is correct. This program is just for residential platting activity. So, if by any chance one single plat has both residential and commercial and industrial in it, the commercial and industrial comes out of the calculation.
Okay. Thank you.
Please continue.
Thank you. So communities are encouraged to take the most advantage of land for development with the private lots and local streets, and that's how they can basically boost the net residential density. So smarter design, better connectivity of plats and streets. So the highest net residential acres was again in 2003, and that's the very light brown line, as you can see. And then after that, the highest one was in 2005. Looks like it's also 2000. Sorry. Either way, you can observe that while less net residential land uses have been platted compared to that very high number in 2003, more land has been set aside so that you can see that the pink has grown quite a bit. And this information, information that the acreage that is set aside for future development is also used in population forecast modeling. Oh, that was the end. Anyway, with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions you may have.
Any additional questions?
Madam Chair.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, again, so we are doing this to connect our data with what is actually happening in the field and monitor. Is that kind of the point of this, just so I understand the genesis of what we're trying to do with that developing suburban edge?
Madam Chair, Council Member, I'll try to answer that question. If there's a gap, maybe Lisa can help. The purpose of the program was to capture these activities or these planning sort of activities at a point that are not captured anywhere else. So because the building permit hasn't been issued yet, they're not captured there. And because this is an actual plan, it's not 100% captured by land use either. So that's where the actual number of units comes into play. Whereas if based on land use, you can only have the minimum and maximum. So the point of it was to try to capture the intention of the cities at a point where there seemed to be a gap, and to give them the credit for that, regardless of how the market forces are playing a role in forcing the hand, I would say, in some areas for lower density or higher density, basically. Lisa, do you want to?
Yes, Madam Chair. I would also add that initially when this program had started, there was it was on the heels of the council's policy at that time to hold a very firm MUSA line, and there was a lot of discussion and debate in the region that the line was constricting land supply. So as part of reworking that policy, the council worked with these two groups, with Metro Cities, AMM at that time, and Betsy, to work through a policy that made sense to have a continued rolling land supply, so there wasn't an over constraint of land available within the MISA. And to get at what that land supply was, this is the pre-permit stage of where you have available lots that aren't built upon yet. The eight groups decided on that the subdivision process was the place where you could be able to tell how much land was available as compared to just what was guided. Because we can talk about what's guided all day long, but what's actually within the existing, say like the 2020 MUSA or moving up to the 2030 MUSA, how many lots are actually available and what's out there would help both the council at a regional scale, but also local governments to be able to say, do we have enough rolling inventory to support our growth going forward? So that was the initial genesis of this program. The council's MUSA policy has since changed and has become a little less restrictive than it had been in the past. No doubt we still hear from folks from time to time that they think our policy is too constrained, but we actually leave a lot of that decision making to the local governments at this point.
Councilmember Johnson?
Just thank you. This is helping me because I was around at that time. So in local government. So I'm trying to also understand. So we didn't want to wait for building permits. We were just trying to get, once a plat is approved, which in most cases it's going to move forward. It's pretty rare unless there's a crash or something strange that it won't move forward because time is of the essence with developers, right? So the advantage though was to capture it early, therefore we were getting the voluntary participation versus waiting for the building permit info, which we would get no matter what, correct? Am I reading that right?
Madam Chair, council members. Yes, usually building permit is at the time that they've done construction, and we have a decent return rate on reporting on building permits. But that's also at a point I should add to my history piece is that we were also trying to ensure that communities were developing at their guided densities, or at least consistent with their adopted plans. Because when we were seeing building permits very early on in the early 2000s, we were seeing densities, at least in the sewer connection permits, densities that were lower than what was guided in the plan, or densities that were overall in a community where a community was pushing down their guided or their allowable density to the lowest end of the range. So we're sitting at 1.5 units an acre instead of at 3, but that was what was allowable. So trying to get it earlier rather than at the end after the money has been spent on building these buildings and saying you can't connect them, of saying, hey, that plat doesn't look like it's consistent with your guided density was also meant as a second check to make sure that communities were actually consistent with their plans. And as Raya's report has shown is that overall, for most communities, they're sitting right there at that consistent with their guided land uses and sitting at the midpoint of that range too.
And Madam Chair, if I may. And so we had our initial round of cities volunteer and they got a credit or something for doing that. I'm not sure, again, what that means. I should know, but I don't.
Is this mainly?
Madam Chair, Council Member, by credit we mean basically a boost in the density calculation and land use analysis. So, for example, the acreage that was reported through the Plat Monitoring program, the net acreage, and the number of units that was created as part of those plats, single family and multifamily, they're kind of get added to the density calculation table. So it's like an additional line in that table. So it boosts the number of acres and the number of units, and therefore it brings up the density, overall density.
Madam Chair, again, so that is for working with us, they got, I'm trying to use the right words, kind of an artificial boost, a credit. It wasn't actual, they just got something for participating. Is that what I'm hearing?
Madam Chair, council members, the participation, what communities were telling us before we had this program was that they're saying, but we're doing these densities higher in real life, but you're only showing, you're basing your density analysis council on what we've put in our plan, but we're going above and beyond that. We should be able to get credit for that.
Got it.
So that's where that kind of credit notion comes in, and that's part of the council's MUSA implementation guidelines, is that when a community's platted density shows that they're above their 3 units an acre, then we add that into their overall planned density to give them that credit for kind of past good planning, I guess is what you could call it.
And then, Madam Chair, so this is so interesting to me. So we've got a lot of history now. Now, how many cities are participating?
45 cities at the moment. Yeah.
And again, is it all in the same scenario where it's voluntary and they still get the credit? Is that still the model, or has that changed since we launched the program?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, so there were the initial communities that voluntarily started participating in the program. There were 12 of them, but then after that, communities were added to the program as a condition of their comprehensive plan, either a comprehensive plan update authorization or like a comprehensive plan amendment authorization. So it was part of the council's review. We haven't seen anything like that yet in this round, but a lot of the communities were added in kind of a 2008-2009 time period when we were going through the 2030 comprehensive plan update authorizations. So that was besides the 12 communities that initially participated voluntarily, the rest have been added to the program.
And Madam Chair,
Councilmember.
thank you for bearing with me on this. And so those additional communities, the council's authorized, I'm assuming we don't do things without authorization, but that's a new thing for some communities. It's not that, they're being, I think, compelled to do. So was that a welcome moment for them, or was there pushback, or?
Madam Chair, council members, I was here. I don't recall there being a whole lot of kind of hard pushback, but more questions about what does it mean. When I was doing this program back then, I'd spent a lot of time with new participating communities on walking through what the forms look like. It was pretty simple, especially because most communities were added during the crash, so there wasn't a lot for them to report. So they had several years before they needed to actually send in reports on, and it really is simply filling out a simple spreadsheet and sending in a copy of the plat. So pretty straightforward, shouldn't take more than 5 minutes to do the work. And many communities have actually added it as part of their subdivision review process in their own local planning process. So it just gets all packaged together and sent in. And they use it as part of analyzing the density, so they know they're consistent with how we analyze density. So we've tried to make it simple for folks to do that, and the value of the data is much better when all of those suburban edge communities are participating. There was a lot of value that communities were seeing, especially if you look at the last page of your staff report on kind of those individual comparisons for each community, of seeing what's happening in other communities and kind of comparing against, like, oh, I see, wow, they had a lot. Being able to do that added a lot of value, and so everyone participating, they could, I would say there wasn't a lot of pushback, but just more questions on how much work it was going to be, but in the end finding it not too difficult.
And Madam Chair, last but not least. So, and again, and it's suburban edge because it's growing, and the MUSA was extended, and they're hooking up new connections. And I will be done. But is there any value now that we're again pushing densities, inside the suburban edge, and that's certainly impacting flow? And I don't need, but I'm just interested about all of this because it would be interesting. I want to be careful what I ask for because it's a lot for cities to do these things too. I just want to make sure it's impactful and it hasn't outgrown its usefulness, and that we're not just focusing on a set of communities, again, for a moment in time or a span of time, that, you know what I'm thinking. Yeah. And I'm probably thinking the way a lot of suburban edge type communities may have interacted over time. It's interesting that I understand the focus, and yet I'm not even asking a question anymore. I'll just flip it.
Madam Chair, Councilmember, I'll start and I'll talk a little bit about the program. Maybe Lisa can talk about the sewer capacity piece of it.
Madam Chair, I'll save you the time. I can meet with staff outside of this unless you're all just dying to know where I'm going with this. But just, I don't want to hijack the whole meeting either, so.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I can just quickly say regarding this program, staying within the communities where it currently is. So those are communities that have greenfield available, whereas the communities that are inward more than these guys, they don't have any more land left. So all of their development will become infill. Really they're not really platting the in a sense that what we are trying to capture in these communities, that's all greenfield when we're so yes, some of these communities will grow out of this program as they become more and more developed, and then there's just no more land left in those communities. But for the most part, they have greenfield available, and that's what we're trying to capture. Did you want to add something, Lisa?
I would
Anything
just,
else, Ms.
Madam
Ross?
Chair, quickly, I would just add that one item that the council also considered in the last cycle and that we've been working on as staff is looking at the same kind of high-level questions of consistency with comprehensive plan and overall density of communities in urban center, and suburban designations, using our existing survey tools as a vehicle for that rather than adding another item on that. So we've had some limited success in that and are looking at different methods of making it simple and not adding yet another survey tool in that, and trying to figure out how to answer some of those same questions of communities that we're asking of our suburban edge communities.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions or comments on this particular topic? We're good. We'll move on to the next one, our next information, which is 2018 Agricultural Preserves Report.
Yes.
Ismaili, thank you.
Yes. Madam Chair, council members, again, thank you for having me with another report, and that's the 2018 program report of the Metropolitan Agricultural Preserves. As we touched on briefly in the beginning of the Plat Monitoring program, the Agricultural Preserves program is another tool in the long-range planning, kind of future land use guiding and development that defines where areas are not to be developed. So that's a bit opposite of the Plat Monitoring program. So the Metropolitan Agricultural Preserves Program was actually established in 1980 by the Minnesota legislature and has been monitored by the Metropolitan Council since 1982. This program was created to encourage the use of agricultural land for food production and provide means for preservation of areas planned for long-term agricultural use. And this is only in the 7-county metro area. There are similar programs outside of the 7-county metro, but this program, the Metropolitan Agricultural Preserves Program, is only for the 7-county metro area. The program, through a certification process, designates land as eligible for program enrollment, and then the communities are expected to plan accordingly in their local comprehensive plans and also in their zoning ordinances. So these areas are specifically mapped also as part of the comprehensive plan updates. In order for pieces of land or parcels to be eligible for enrollment in the agricultural preserves program, parcels should be 40 acres or more and also need to remain in the program for at least 8 years. There are some rare instances where smaller parcels and acreages are acceptable, but there are certain criteria to meet those expectations, and I'm not going to go into that. The criterion is set out in the statute. The Ag Preserves property owners receive a tax cut as part of this program, and the credit comes from the county's conservation fund, which is basically from mortgage registrations and deed transfers, or for short, MRDT. And the other part of it comes from the state conservation fund and also state general fund. More information about the program funding will be coming later in this presentation. Enrollment includes the landowner applying for the program, providing parcel information to the local authority, and an affidavit from the authority certifying the parcel for long-term agricultural use. And then the local authority also needs to certify eligible land by resolution. This figure, which is not the figure is not included in the report, but it's based on those very long tables that are in the report. It's just another way of showing it, that the total, this basically shows the total acres, excuse me, enrolled in the program in the metro. Enrollment dropped until 2009, which was lowest at just below 180,000 acres. And that is, again, consistent with market recession. Then enrollment started picking up with the market rebound when many landowners started enrolling their land in the program. Then it increased steadily until 2013, and there have been minimal changes since. So this kind of goes a bit up, a bit down. In 2018, just over 206,000 acres were enrolled, which is just about 1% decrease from 2017. So even though it looks a lot, but it actually is not. So this is figure 1 of the report that shows the breakdown of acres by county. Carver County, that's in red, has the highest number of acres. That's just over 105,000 acres, so more than 50, just about 50% of the acres enrolled. And that's then followed by Dakota County in green. That's over 71,000 acres. Ramsey County, as you can see, it's not there. Ramsey County has no agricultural acres enrolled in the program. Anoka and Washington counties with the dark blue on the top and then orange on the bottom both experienced steady decline in the acres enrolled, and that is basically pretty much consistent with development proposals in those areas. So this map shows the agricultural preserves parcels that in green, and as you can see, it's kind of consistent with what I was explaining, with Carver County having most of the acreage enrolled, and then after that followed by Dakota County. This data is compiled from, so we receive information from the counties, from Minnesota Department of Revenue, and the legislature, and then we provide this information to local jurisdictions for their planning purposes. The program is funded by a $5 fee collected by the counties on MRDTs, or as I mentioned, mortgage registrations and deed transfers. Counties retain half of this in the County Conservation Fund and then send the other half divided between Minnesota Conservation Fund and State General Fund. If the amount in the County Conservation Fund is not sufficient to reimburse the jurisdiction, then the counties get the money from the State Conservation Fund and the State General Fund. They get it from the State Conservation Fund. If that is not sufficient either, then it goes into the State General Fund for reimbursement. So in this table, you see that, for example, Dakota County pays about 76, and this is for 2018, paid about $76,000 to program participants with over 71,000 acres enrolled. The county had to draw around $148,000 of that from the State Conservation Fund. So in 2018, Carver, Dakota, and Scott counties drew money from the State Conservation Fund with almost $207,000 remaining in the fund. So that's the last column. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? No questions. Really interesting presentations, both of them. It's incredible the information that is collected by the Metropolitan Council that's available to help planning regionally, but also for the various communities in their own planning and the information that's available through all the data collection that the Metropolitan Council does. It's really quite amazing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's lots of work. Thank you for your part, and Ms. Bras, thank
Certainly.
you for that, your part. So
Thank you.
thank you for your presentations. Very good.
Thank you.
And with that, that concludes the business for tonight, unless anybody has anything else. If not, we're adjourned.